Atheists say dumb things, apparently, and it takes a smug hunter to point out just how dumb those things are. Thankfully, having these things pointed out might stop atheists saying dumb things ever again, and we can help our kids in the future not be as dumb as we are. Hello, I'm the Skeptic, the British floating circle that watches people make extraordinary claims and then I explain why I don't accept what they're saying, in the hope that some folks who also don't believe get some reassurance that they're not alone in their non-belief. Chris here from Missing the Mark loves to point out the stupid things that atheists say, though it really just seems like it's something he's decided they say, since I don't hear people who lack a belief in a god actually say these things. He's even got an entire series on stupid things atheists say, and each one seems to really miss the mark. However, before finding out how stupid atheists are, if this isn't your first Skeptic video, hit the like, the subscribe and the bell, and perhaps I won't feel stupid anymore or something. And a super thanks to those that hit super thanks in some recent videos: Shovelhead Steve, Dwayne Young, High Inquisitor, Turtle M, and Digital Demonic Davros. Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe bestows leaves upon you all. More hen. Just how dumb are the things atheists say then, Stoffington?
On today's episode of Stupid Things Atheists Say, we're going to look at It's Someone Else's Fault.
I'm not sure what that has to do with proving the existence of a god, but okay then.
This is one I've seen actually from both sides, really. I have seen plenty of Christians say that, like, so the thing I'm talking about, atheists saying, like, oh, it's your fault or someone else's fault that I'm atheist. Like, here's this Christian and they're mean or bad or stupid or whatever, or there's this other Christian and like I thought he was good but he turned out not to be, or here's this bad Christian, so that's why I'm not Christian.
Great, they're bad or mean or stupid or whatever. Do we tally up how many times the mark is missed just in coherent sentence construction? And if someone steps away from religion because of how they were treated, that's okay. They may then conclude that there's no governing being after that. What's stupid is accepting a claim with no evidence. You know, like the existence of a god.
You also see a whole bunch of Christians who will do the exact same thing. Like, you know, take a look. It's, imagine if everybody, like, actually was good, but, you know, instead they you see bickering and you see various, whatever.
No, I don't see. I genuinely have no idea what you're talking about right now.
Of course, it's our fault for not being better. And so, something to say in both. Oh, sorry, I forgot. I normally always begin with a disclaimer mentioning, in this series, Stupid Things Atheists Say, I'm talking about how there are things which are stupid, which atheists say. Not all atheists are stupid. And if you want to see a very intelligent atheist, check out Zarathustra's Serpent on YouTube. So I don't know why I bother, because, there are plenty of idiots on the internet and they won't pay any attention to that. But in any event, okay, I always want to mention that just to be super extra clear for anyone who might benefit if there is such a creature.
Missing the mark on how to address your audience there, Chrissy boy.
To be fair to the thing in question, it is certainly the case that when Christians are saintly, this does make it easier for some people to believe in Christianity.
Nothing to do with the existence of a god, then. They believe because people are nice. In that case, come on over to giraffism, where the one true deity who ate all the other gods because she was hungry, Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leaf be upon her, promotes being nice to everyone. No judging folks for who they love or what they want to do with their bodies. Just get on and live your life the best way you can. No murdering, drowning, maiming, slaving, raping or anything. And giraffism has t-shirts that you can wear to show off your love of Lisa. Link under the video.
Of course, you will also always find the people who want to kill the saints. There are plenty of saints have lots of enemies. It is not by any means the case that people who are extraordinarily loving and kind and patient and generous and have all of the virtues and have them in abundance are universally liked. A lot of people hate them. A lot of people react against this and react against it violently. There's a reason why a lot of saints are martyrs. People who were willing to die rather than repudiate the faith.
Maybe because they're promoting an invisible friend that isn't as good as the other invisible friend. That's usually not atheists, though. That's other believers. And being willing to die for something you believe in doesn't make it any more true. Which is where I felt like this was going.
You can't push this too far. Plenty of people are saints, though they attract some, also push away others. And not for being sanctimonious or anything, for being actually good and patient and kind and loving and generous, because there are a lot of bad people in the world who really actually dislike when they see people who are good and react against it. And if you don't believe that, you're just a moron. So, you grow up, like be older than like 7, and you will have, look throughout the world and you'll discover that actual, goodness is not universally, recognized. There are people who react very, very negatively against it.
I mean, you're not helping your cause by just flat out insulting people, Christopher.
Which also kind of gets to, it kind of brings me to the problem with this. I mean, for one thing, usually when I see this, so when I see this from Christians, about 1 out of 10 times, I think it is actually legitimately a call to be better, and that's good.
And maybe not calling people morons, huh?
We all should be better. We should be perfect, just as God is perfect.
Perfect, you say? A God that drowns people, that kills people for not ejaculating in their brother's widow, that doesn't disallow slavery, and yes, you can take all of those for future quotes for your stupid things atheists say, because defending any of those very simple points will make you look, well, stupid.
I mean, we should. And that's a thing we need constantly to remind ourselves of, and so those reminders are in themselves good. You can't take that very far, though, into the actual subject matter. You can't take that as an excuse for people who reject the faith for various reasons. About 9 out of 10 times, this seems like it's just people who are trying to sort of passive-aggressively beat up on their fellow Christians in order to win some sort of dispute. So, most of the time, frankly, I don't think it's really anything of value. It's just, as I said, people who are, trying to be less obvious about the fact that they're fighting and, frankly, doing the very thing they're complaining about.
It really seems like you have each person figured out, Chrissy. But hey, here's a wild idea, and stop me if you've already thought of it, but maybe, why don't you just ask folks why they don't believe, instead of making up strange scenarios where you struggle to articulate yourself when refuting?
Now, when this comes from the atheist side, I would class this roughly into about 1 out of 10 times you have a person who was seriously confused by, people that they trusted deeply who hurt them. Often parents, for example. So occasionally there's some real, there's genuine pain. There's some genuine, grave injury to a person that they're trying to deal with. And the problem is it just doesn't intellectually work. And so I'm going to get there.
Oh, wow. This guy's smug meter goes off the charts. That was basically emotional damage doesn't count when it comes to lack of belief in a god. Well, you, Christopher. Let people make up their own minds on why they don't believe. And instead of trying to think of ways to convince them to come back to a god that hasn't ever been proven, let the undemonstrated god do it.
But, that's at least something understandable and in some sense respectable. As I said, when I see this from atheists, it's about 1 out of 10 times.
I'm willing to bet he doesn't even know 10 atheists.
Probably about, I want to say, another 7 to 8 out of 10 times, it's just an excuse.
Tell me you're making these numbers up on the spot without telling me you're making these numbers up on the spot. Thanks, body language books.
It's just here's a convenient thing that's hard to answer, so I'll just say this, even though it doesn't logically make any sense and is kind of stupid.
Wait, I've lost which side he's talking about now, because you absolutely can apply that to a theist's reasoning.
But, it functions kind of like a gotcha and, puts the other person on the defensive if they accept the rhetorical frame anyway. And so, that's about, as I said, 7 to 8 out of 10 are that. 1 to 2 out of 10 are just awful people reacting against goodness that puts them to shame. And they're just straight up what they're saying is the bad stuff is actually people who are being better than them, and how they really hate that.
How can a person say so much and yet say absolutely nothing? That's a real skill, Topher.
As I said, that's about 1 to 2 out of 10 times that I see this really look like they fall into that category. Now, the problem with all of it is it doesn't logically follow in the slightest. You can see this very simply in why people talk about the ad hominem fallacy. The fallacy of arguing that somebody's argument is true, not because of any merits of the argument, but simply because of the person, simply because the person is a bad person.
Not always. Remember, Crisscross, atheists are as dumb as rocks.
The overwhelming majority of atheists are all brain dead. Because, of course, rocks and specks of dust and branches and dead rats are all atheists by the lack of belief definition. And the reason why that doesn't work is because it doesn't matter. No amount of a human being a liar or selfish or lecherous or whatever means that God doesn't exist.
You're right. It doesn't matter. A God doesn't exist until you can prove it does, which no one has done.
There's absolutely no way one human being's sins can possibly prove that.
That's not how it works. I really think I might start a series called All the Times Christopher Misses the Mark, and then start with People Not Being Good Doesn't Mean God Doesn't Exist. He really needs to work at a salad bar with all this word salad being tossed about. Maybe you could make a video called Here is Undeniable Proof of a God, rather than just saying atheists are logically wrong because they're stupid or whatever.
You can try to work an argument from evil, although it's particularly stupid if you try it from a single person.
No, just prove a God.
You know, like the argument from evil, though it does not work, and I've addressed this in other places for the simple reason that there is absolutely no way to argue from finite information that you can't, that the permission of the evil that we see is not part of greater good, that could not be brought about without it. You would need to be omniscient to be able to do that, so you can't make the argument from evil work.
So women get sexually assaulted because it's part of a greater good? Babies are born with life-threatening diseases because of a greater good? Christopher Robin, that might be the dumbest thing I've ever heard anyone say ever. And Eric Hovind said this.
16 times 2? 34.
But to the degree that you at least can rhetorically push it, it works a lot better if you talk about like natural disasters, plagues, earthquakes, tsunamis, things like that. Work way, way better than like there was like one guy who lied to me. So it still doesn't really work. Even for like trying to push in the direction of the argument from evil. But it just logically makes absolutely no sense. Like,
you trying to reason things this way makes no sense.
I don't believe that Christianity is true because I have met a bad Christian, or I've met several bad Christians.
This whole thing would be way easier if you just went and asked someone why they don't think Christianity is true, instead of making it all up incorrectly. I don't accept Christianity as true for the same reason I don't accept Islam, Hinduism, Judaism, and Sikhism. I'm simply not convinced that any of the gods exist. So instead of saying, you're just mad at one person in each of those faiths, get to proving any one of the gods and maybe we can start discussing whether they're worth worshipping. As it stands, none of these gods are strong enough or intelligent enough to do it themselves.
Or, the 5 Christians that I knew were all bad. I mean, they're related to each other, and it's a tiny sample size, and I haven't bothered to learn anything about anyone else amongst the hundreds of millions. I'm going to assume they're all just as bad as like the 4 people that I ran into.
Isn't that exactly what you're doing here? Maybe basing your entire understanding of an atheist position on the 1 or 2 folks you've actually interacted with isn't the way to go. I have family that believe in a God. Close friends. They're all great people, though we may disagree on a few things. Doesn't make the lack of compelling evidence for a God suddenly change.
Whichever version of that. I've seen all of these things from different people, and again, people are almost never this explicit. They usually take longer to get to the point. They usually obfuscate, put things more rhetorically. But like, if you get to the actual like logical meat of what they're saying, that's the part I'm presenting.
This is when someone's getting to the point? Another mark missed, perhaps.
It's not helpful to anybody to use deceptive rhetoric, so I'm not going to repeat their deceptive rhetoric. All the rhetorical atheists in the comments who are rhetorical thinkers who only recognize rhetoric and not actual logical content will of course say, oh, you're straw-manning it because you didn't phrase it in exactly the rhetoric that I did. You only said the logical equivalent to it. Well, it's the problem with rhetorical thinkers. They're not really thinking.
The smug arrogance of this guy, though. Am I right?
This whole thing, it does appeal to sympathy, right? Like somebody who is betrayed by somebody they should not have been betrayed by. And since they shouldn't have been betrayed by anybody. That's anyone they were betrayed by. But especially if it was, somebody who was in a position of authority over them, like, parents, teachers, priests, etc. Like, if there's somebody who is, like, genuinely bad there, it really, your heart really does go out to them. Like, that's terrible. That's awful. It's a terrible thing to suffer through. And life is hard.
And yet, you're saying it's stupid. Because that's what you called the video.
Life is hard for somebody who has suffered as a result of that. And that's true, but, like, that's as far as it goes. Like, yeah, it really sucks when bad things happen. It's really unfortunate. It is very much to be pitied. It is a thing very much where one should try to give extra help to a person who has been hurt. But it has no logical implications whatsoever.
Right. Because a God still hasn't been demonstrated to exist.
Like, my father believed, not my personal father is a very kind man. But, my father, would talk about Jesus, and also he, was mean and cruel. Yeah, that's terrible. But, like, it has no logical implications. And at some point, you need to grow up and be an adult human being and ask yourself the question, what is actually true about the world?
Oh, the irony of a grown man saying that you need to grow up and believe in an invisible friend that literally has never been demonstrated to exist. This guy is one step away from becoming Matt Powell and saying that you should stop playing video games too.
Grow up.
Sure, Matt.
I met a terrible person. Well, it doesn't mean that everything they said was wrong. I mean, like, did this terrible person believe the earth was round? Does that mean you should be a flat earther? Well, no, obviously not. And so, there are other emotional reasons that go along with this. And not with flat earthing, but logically speaking, it's the same thing. Like, like if Hitler believed the earth was round, does that mean that all decent people should reject that and believe in the flat earth? No.
It'd just be another claim that needs demonstrating, which in this instance can happen. This really has got to be trolling. Who really is this backwards?
No, because just because Hitler was a very evil man does not mean that you should reject everything that he believed to be true.
We get it, because believers can be bad is not a reason to not accept a God. I don't accept a God because none of them have met the burden of proof of their existence.
You should only reject the false things he believed to be true, but you should also reject the false things of that incredibly good people believe to be true. You should just reject false things, and you should embrace true things.
Oh, hang on. I think he's got it.
And the people who believe in them, like, there are a posteriori arguments, right? So I'm not saying that there is, if you look at, essentially you can tell a tree by its fruits.
Bloody hell, spit it out, man. Maybe start writing a script. You might be able to say a lot more in a lot less.
Right, like if you look at what in general do the people who adopt this belief tend to do after adopting this belief? Do they become better or worse? Where do they go?
So here we have a man who thinks he understands everything about everyone. I know hundreds of people that used to believe in a God and now no longer do. Have they become worse people? Well, not to me. Are they better? No noticeable changes. They're literally the same people who no longer believe in a God. Maybe they've become more empathetic to people in need and realise that this life is all we have, so be good to those around you and make it the best it can be whilst you're still here to enjoy it. Jeez, Chris, this trying to sound smart is really not doing you any favours.
No, you do want to ask the question that way, incidentally, because especially adults don't change that much when they change beliefs. This is a thing a lot of people get very, very wrong, incidentally. I don't know why. Human beings have two stages, childhood and adulthood. In childhood, they're very plastic, moldable, very changeable. Childhood only lasts for a while. By the teenage years, that plasticity has gone way down. Like, you still get a fair amount of it in, like, the early teenage years. By, like, 18, 19, people tend to be a lot less plastic.
Which is why people indoctrinate children. They'll believe anything from a source they trust. I'm not kidding when I say this. He then goes on a massive, massive tangent with some of the biggest word salad that involves fruit, too. A fruit salad, maybe. You can see the whole video in the section below. We can pick up a bit further on when he says that some atheists aren't really atheists.
You have plenty of atheists who really aren't atheists. The sort of people who will talk about, the universe in personified terms, like the universe owes me this, or, the universe will watch out for you, or the universe will see that justice is done. Like, yeah, you're not actually atheist.
They might well be. You know how to find out if they believe in a god? Ask them. Some people say universe because there's not really much else to say. They might still not believe in a god.
You're some sort of philosophical theist, or kind of vaguely paganish sort of monotheist, kind of vaguely paganish sort of thing with just weird terminology. So, this cuts in all directions. Like, you can't attribute them, somebody who is going to talk like that, you can't attribute to atheism proper. So this cuts absolutely every way. Like, evaluating, telling a tree by its fruits is a difficult thing to do, because you have to really look. Now, in the original of telling a tree by its fruits, incidentally, Jesus was actually talking about individuals. This is way, 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 way easier to do in the case of individuals. If an individual is consistently kind and generous and honest and loyal and so on, you kind of can figure out what sort of person they are. And if they're not, well, also you can tell what kind of person they are.
And yet, it doesn't demonstrate the existence of any god. Are you going to get to the point soon? Is there a point?
Human beings are much easier to figure out by looking at their fruits. Like, do they merely talk about goodness, or are they actually good? You can tell a lot about a person this way. And in the original context in which Christ said, talked about telling a tree by its fruits, it actually works.
Well, I'm doing that here, and I'm just getting a load of smug.
It's not that it doesn't work, it's just it's way, way, way harder in terms of what are the consequences of various beliefs. So, while there is some validity to that, its enormous difficulty means that you can't really use this as very much of a primary sort of way of telling things. Like, what sort of culture are people raised in? And, so for example, if people are raised in a culture with tremendous amounts of fornication going on, where they are taught that fornication is good, like modern America, for example, commonly you see the idea that fornication is actually is straight up good, is healthy and beneficial, that fornication is a virtuous action, is a thing you see a lot of modern Americans actually saying, especially in media. Less so in my experience in ordinary life.
Now he's insulting most folks in the United States. I've not seen anywhere that fornication is good. I'm not against being fornicated with consent.
It's not the sort of thing people will converse about in the grocery store all that often. Even there, you'll see that a fair amount. So in a culture in which people are massively in favor of fornication, and everywhere teach that fornication is good, fornication is virtuous, fornication is the way to be a good human being.
Okay, he's just making stuff up now. Setting up ridiculous straw men, which he then paints up to be really smart arguments that I can't help if you don't understand. I'm sorry, but no. It's a shame because he looks like he really could be a good guy, beyond all the bows and smug and projection. I think we can safely say this is stupid things Christopher thinks atheists say, but actually he's way off. But maybe you think he's right and atheists do say some really dumb stuff. Like, I'm unconvinced a God exists. No, that sounds good to me. There's a whole other 20-ish minutes to this video, and I didn't even get to it because the smug was just getting annoying. But the link to that is in the description. I'm going to skeptic this as another mark missed. A big thank you to this month's top-level ticks on Patreon. Addy Rockhart, the Enixes, Elizabeth, Jakari, and the Absolute Lunatic Travis, as well as all the $3 base ticks. You can become a supporter on Patreon too at patreon.com/theskeptic. The link is in the description, along with links to all my other socials. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. From me, the Skeptic, stay safe, keep thinking logically, and ask questions. Skepticism is the first step towards truth. See you next Saturday.